everyone, thank you for dropping by today. I'm Henrik, I hope you're doing well. We took an extra couple of days off last week as we were traveling a bit early in the week, and we are now getting back into the groove, getting going here again. So thank you for your patience and for allowing us to take a short breather. It's good to be back with you again. RedIceCreations.com and RedIceMembers.com, that's our main websites. As we get started here again, we'll ease into it with a segment together with Maurice Herman, who is behind the 108 Maurice 108 YouTube channel. You might have seen some of his videos where he shares opinions and analysis on the news and what goes on behind the news, the theater of politics and current events. We are going to talk about the agenda of the war, specifically in the Middle East, and who is pulling the strings, exacerbating the conflict. But we'll begin to get Maurice's take on Ebola and, of course, other scaremongering tactics to keep us busy and occupied with media sleight-of-hand tricks. Well, hi, Maurice. Welcome to Red Ice Radio. Good to have you here. Thank you for coming on. I hope you're doing well today.
Well, I'm honored to be here. I admire your radio show very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I've been enjoying your videos on your YouTube channel, some good independent thought and analysis of world madness, and there certainly isn't a lack of issues to address or discuss. And I do have a few lined up for today that I wanted to ask you more about and talk more about. But first of all, tell us a little bit about the background on your channel, when you started that up, kind of how you ended up in Cambodia, and when you just got started on talking about all this kind of stuff.
Well, in childhood, I always wanted to travel, and no doubt because my parents took me traveling. I traveled in my childhood, and the fact that I'm in Cambodia is just by extension. I got the ability to travel, and I seized the opportunity. I tried India, Malaysia, but now I'm in Cambodia. But the starting of the channel was about, I'm sorry, two dogs have just come in. Starting with the channel was really, I've tried to get into the media for years, with not so much success, but here and there. I was on the BBC once. But so the YouTube just offered an ability to do something personal, as we all know what it is now. But it gave me an entree into the media.
Well, we have a lot of things to discuss here. Obviously, you cover a lot of current events on the YouTube channel. A lot of things that you get into, kind of similar topics, obviously, that we discuss and talk about as well. There's a number of issues I just wanted to kind of check off, I guess, from the list because there's so much going on right now. But tell us about the Ebola thing. I guess that's one of the latest things that you've been talking more about, looking into in terms of how this has been set up and how people are drawn into these kinds of tremendously, threatening scenarios and everything else. How do you view Ebola from your perspective in terms of how you've seen, the news unfold about this? I know you did a good kind of cover and a shorter interview about this not too long ago as well. So what's that all about? What's your breakdown of that?
Well, it's most of all a tool to paralyze us all with fear and distract us from sensible conversation about maybe bigger issues. That's my overall take on it. I couldn't really speculate as to if the virus is real, if it's man-made or not. I guess by default, I'm saying I could speculate that it's any of those alternatives. But there's the degree of hoaxes we've had foisted upon us should also allow us to consider that there is no Ebola, that there were just 3 or 4 people that got it and the rest is hype. This is perfectly feasible in this day of mainstream media concocting news. So, we're all in the guessing game, but there's very, very little, if not virtually nothing, coming out of Africa. Apart from, official mainstream commentators. We're not seeing the Africans putting stuff up on Twitter or on Facebook, and they've all got mobile phones with cameras. We're not getting any first-hand accounts. And some of these video accounts with the professional journalist commentators are virtually fraudulent. You see one where a guy's walking away with a wad of money in his hand. You see another one, the kid runs up to the center and then collapses, on cue. So there's plenty of room for suspicion. I think we're in such a gray area these days about what to believe and what not to believe. You could almost question if it's reverse psychology. Anything is possible.
Yeah.
I mean, to say they even throw out some stuff that's obviously fraudulent just to keep us confused. But I think there's a big agenda going on, and Ebola is just one in a series of events, and there will be another one after it, and there's been plenty before it. Well, for scare headlines. Go on, please.
Well, exactly. I mean, a lot of people have been allowed to flown out from, West Africa as well, which I found quite interesting. A lot of them have been flown into hospitals in Spain, in Switzerland, to America as well. There was that scare in Atlanta, of course, and they magically managed to cure that one guy. I forget his name now, but he was, this miracle, of course. But it's quite interesting to see it from that perspective, because we realize that the amount of scaremongering behind this is fairly hyped up when you realize that there are hundreds of thousands of people dying from other things. Every month, every year, there's a number of other things. But here in this case, there's a couple, and that seems to be enough to, ask and demand the whole world to be rearranged accordingly. It's a very, very kind of double standard when you look at it, really.
Yeah, the main thing is to keep us in shock. And the degree of reality on Ebola, I think it has a sinister goal. I think it's probably got sinister origins. That's just my hunch from investigating it here and there. There are reports of people poisoning wells with a chemical that creates Ebola symptoms. I have very little trust or faith in the powers governing our media and everything else that we're doing.
Well, exactly, but what do you think? Do you think it's about vaccines at the end of the day, that this is an attempt to try to get as many people as possible? That's what I saw when they're clearly flying out people from these allegedly infected regions and everything else, and then claiming that this is something that's going to spread or whatever. To me, it feels like that's really what people should be looking out for and be careful about in terms of how they're going to push a vaccine on people next.
Well, it's like the ultimate weapon, this Ebola, because they can take away so many civil rights. They can force injecting us in the name of vaccinations. They can force quarantine us. They can, those two should take care of everything. But the vaccinations are a scandal, and it sounds very harsh to consider life without vaccinations, but I think it's a better option if it's one or the other. But they're definitely putting mercury in a lot of vaccinations, which I'm not someone that believes mercury is poisonous, by the way, if it's purified and taken properly. But injecting it into the body is surely madness. And it's going on with babies, and there's the scare of autism on a huge rise, and we see the Amish people don't get much, and they're not getting vaccinated. So it's a case of scaring us all, either that we will get vaccinated or that we have to avoid getting vaccinated. It's our nations have gone askew somewhere. the populations have to live in such fear, and it's escalating. The pressures upon us. I think we'd all like to live peacefully and happily if we'd just be left alone.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think so, but the elite has other plans for people, of course. But no, you make a good point. It's almost like it's martial law through medical, going in that route, as opposed to, some other kind of chaotic upheaval that causes government to step in and say what people can or can't do. This would be a perfect excuse. Now, I don't think that this is going to blow up in that kind of, proportion, because, if they did, there's a whole lot of things that would have to have in place there, of course, in order to follow through on this, either if it's real or not. But it's a kind of like many things are, really, it's a testing ground. You try a little bit and see what happens, see how people respond. A lot of these, I feel anyway, Maurice, is, psychological warfare operations, and they make determinations on how people react. They analyze media, social media these days, to kind of see what the response level is and where they need to go next in order to continue their enforcement of control. I don't know. That's how I see it anyway.
Well, it's twofold. I'd like to come to what's one thing that's going on during this Ebola scare is the military influx from France, Britain, and the United States. They're all sending troops to West Africa. The French have commandeered a place to turn into a military hospital. So that will no doubt just escalate into more troops for AFRICOM. And yes, indeed, they're taking our rights away. But there's a new world order agenda, and it would be hard to know when it started, if it was 100 years ago or 60 years ago, but I would look back that long or even more. And this is just totally we don't have our eyes on the ball anymore because we're all discussing Ebola, you know? It's like they're laughing at us, meaning they know more about it than we know. They know its origins or its purpose, and unfortunately it's just grabbed all the mainstream headlines and it's all the discussion. But if we could just see what they're really up to and what they're really doing, you know, they're bombing away in Iraq and Syria. I have no idea how many things are going on that we're unaware of, but they're transforming our societies under our nose as we live in them.
Oh yeah, well, definitely. You've commented on that many times, and you seem to, you know, realize what's going on in Europe and in America too, of course. You know, despite your vantage point. But what would you say are some of the more important issues? You mentioned a couple there, but if we kind of try to brush away from all these issues that are going on to keep people occupied and whatnot, where do you think people should look? What are some of those key points and key notes where people can realize and kind of understand how this, you know, game is being played, how the countries are being changed right in front of their noses pretty much, but they don't realize because of all of this other noise coming out from the media?
Yes, indeed. Well, I feel that the main goal at all times is to mix the races, which you could argue means to eradicate the races. And I believe it's the number one reason for all of the wars, starting, I say starting with Korea, perhaps before that. But if you look at all these wars, they've been about creating refugees and also as welcoming them to be politically correct. And I've got nothing against people mixing races on a personal level. I wouldn't wish to suggest such a thing. But I think this is being orchestrated en masse. And we are watching in Europe the demise of our nation states. And it was bad enough maybe to lose your nation state on a political, economic level. But we're looking at it racially disappearing as well. So this, I suspect, is the main goal. Of course, once you've destroyed people's traditions, history, and culture, and perhaps terrorize them through bombing them and turning them into refugees, they're then very malleable. And what we're left with is fiat money, which we're all chasing. It's as if it's the only god left standing. And of course, we know that's just printed on a printing press out of thin air, and often on a criminal footing. So I think they're the main issues that we should all be up in arms about. But we're debt-ridden into a society of transience with no community, no cultural homogeneity, and it's an alarming rate, you know.
Yeah.
The migration and you'd have to be naive to believe the mass illegal aliens entering the United States is happening by accident. These things are orchestrated and approved, in my opinion, and this is what we're seeing happen in the whole world. And I would venture that that's the main goal in West Africa, is to get tens of millions of West Africans to emigrate, and you'll have the UNHCR and you'll have everyone else there facilitating this, and that's what I believe these wars are about.
Interesting. Now that's a different take, at least in terms of a lot of people in the alternative. I mean, a lot of people that are savvy to, you know, the plans of the elite and the New World Order they have. It's like they can't see that aspect of it. It's like they're blinded to that. Partially perhaps due to political correctness of we've been taught, especially in the West, through cultural Marxism and a lot of the control of the anthropological fields, biology, etc., social studies, even to a certain extent, that, you know, we're all the same, so those kinds of things doesn't matter. But in your view, Maurice, how do you see that is beneficial to them, of trying to achieve that particular agenda? To me, it's almost like they're trying to create something which is the furthest away from being rooted in anything, and hence, as an individual in that type of environment, you're much more easily, controlled. And specifically, if you have a strong family unit, if you have a strong cultural and heritage background, you're going to be much more resistant to try to oppose whatever is coming in, but perhaps not so in this other scenario what they're creating. What would you say on that?
Well, I'm agreeing. Very well put. People that are vulnerable can be taken anywhere, and we're taught things in school nowadays that you would have thought was in the realm of instinct, but we're basically modeled completely as to what to accept and not accept. You look at the so-called indoctrination of the North Koreans, and I don't think we're really any different. But the reason that and by the way, interestingly, North Korea is maybe the most homogenous nation on earth, the least racial mixing on earth. A good reason to have it as a number one enemy, I say in sarcasm. So the reason they wish to do this is possibly religious texts. There may be, religion always worships and puts in adulation our ancestors. And, if sacred holy men wrote something in the past that's got to be fulfilled today, that is one possibility. I wonder if they really have an inkling on our true origins, which we are in the dark about, and they're not Darwinian. That's speculative on my part, but if for them to act with such impunity and arrogance, it's as if they know something we don't know. They know what's best for us. They also seem to be able to co-opt every other leader and nation on earth. You see Russia playing the game all along, and even Iran. And you kind of wonder what it is. It's as if there's some secret being passed under the table in the quiet about why this is necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We are in the dark, but this secular society that we've been led to believe is for our freedom, etc., I think is a farce, and it's also blinding us to what might be the reality. I think the religious people never gave up control, and they're still in control. And the French Revolution, maybe they were behind it, maybe they got into the shadows at that point, but I think we're still ruled by religious people with religious thoughts and goals.
Interesting. I want to see if we can ask a little bit more about that later. But I mean, I think it's easy to see the erosion that you're talking about occurring specifically in Europe and America as well, of course, including that all of the Western world, basically Australia and New Zealand as well. But is it of your opinion that this is something that's going to occur all over the world? It seems to be specifically targeted towards Westerners at this stage in a way. But is it going to involve, some of the other races as well at the end of this?
No, yeah, I believe it's targeting everyone. I don't think it's particularly white people only. Libya was, it's become a failed state, but initially they were sending in swarms of foreign aid workers. And that's another way of getting foreigners to habitat the place. But it's I think all countries, I don't think I think Russia as well, the reason they're warring with Russia is to break up the Slavic race. No, the intention is everywhere on earth. Mm. And these wars in Africa would be for the purpose of turning it multiracial, multicultural. That's my feeling.
Yeah, I think we'll see a lot more of that down the road. But that's interesting in terms of how and why they're demonizing certain countries and when they're trying to cling on and trying to preserve what they have. I think we've seen that with Japan as well, quite openly. And then, of course, North Korea, that's an obvious one. But they've attacked them for, what they claim is, political reasons, really. But we don't know what's at the root of that. And now, of course, Russia as well. So how do you think they'll go about breaking some of those countries down? Let's look at Russia, for example, which has been something very, very different in this kind of model that we see emerging in the West, and they managed to a certain extent, resist this. I mean, how in the world are they going to be able to break that down, do you think?
Well, there's 1 million Russians in Israel with Israeli citizenship, and they're not sitting down doing nothing. They've all got relatives and friends in Russia. Russia's got a huge fifth column, and it's got its oligarchs to appease, and Putin might be a great leader, and I think he is, but he can't ignore the oligarchs with vested interests, economic interests around the world. So the question is still out. Can Russia maintain itself, or will it be broken up? There's just most of these countries are taken over through corruption, Britain and Sweden included, I'm sure. You only need to corrupt some key people. And on that note, we saw the fall of Tripoli in Libya, and it was because one general was corrupted. He stood the troops down as the NATO allies advanced. And I've been told a similar thing just happened in Mosul in Iraq. So regardless of one's political views or loyalties, you just need a few key figures that are corrupted, fifth columnists, and you've lost the show. So I don't know if Russia will succeed. I hope it does. It's a massive landmass. It doesn't have that much of a population. I think it's just 150 million. It's lost a lot of people in a lot of wars, and they're trying to provoke it into another war now. And they've been corrupting the Ukrainians for decades. This has been cooking, this Ukrainian scenario. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a shame. I've heard other people comment on that as well, and to see the divide and the split between the Ukrainians and the Russians that are so similar in terms of people and who they are, and I've yet to fully comprehend exactly what level of propaganda occurs on one end or the other, but it's been obvious to me anyway that a lot of the old satellite states to the Soviet Union, they want to turn them on Russia as quickly as possible, as we saw with all these revolutions around in these areas, and the way that they basically try to create this very antagonistic relationship, and of course have them fighting amongst each other as opposed to looking into who really is trying to erode the nation from within. So I mean, that's a really good point you're raising there, and something they should be worried about, which is difficult to do, of course, when you have people battling on street level, as been occurring in Ukraine in this regard. So it's difficult to kind of break out of that and realize who's really pulling the strings behind the scenes,
And what they appeal to in people, and it's often hedonistic appeal. The West offers, look, you can get rich, and in fact, it just means get in debt. I mean, it's hard to know why the people veer towards the West. It might just be pure corruption, just pure self-interest. There's money on the table, but Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and pop music did attract everyone, as opposed to alternative cultures. That seems to be the reality. Yes.
Yeah, it kind of does. At least initially, right? It's something that people get. They get a desire for it, but once I think they've had the taste for it, something begins to go sour after a while, and people realize that there's really nothing there. It's empty. I mean, I think we're kind of seeing a resurgence of sort among younger people that want to have, they're kind of getting tired and sick of the PC garbage. They're getting, sick of all of the phony multiculturalism that we're seeing, which really is monocultural, and they want to have some kind of, stability and tradition. It's almost in that territory now, specifically in the West, in a way that kind of opposition and true counterculture today is not what it was in the 60s. Would you agree?
I would agree, and I think there's a malaise in our societies, and most people are not so happy or content anymore. We can't really believe in capitalism per se anymore, and on a personal level, there's issues of trust and betrayal and street crime, and the society is basically dissolving before our eyes. And people are not so happy anymore. But of course, we were referring to the Eastern European satellite states, or Ukraine, where the people want to become integrated. Even Turkey wants to be part of Europe. But it's not going to last any joy. I don't know what the attraction is, because when we look at our own societies, they're not in good shape at all.
No, exactly. They're falling apart from within, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's my attraction to traveling, to going to third world countries and being with indigenous people, is just to avoid, our advanced so-called societies, because it's shallow, very shallow.
And it didn't used to be. That's the other quirk. It's been co-opted. That's how I see it from within. Today it's almost like the West represents nothing. What that has to offer in that package that they're trying to force upon these other countries that don't have the central bank and the the IMF loans and everything else. That it's really nothing there, right? But at the core of it, it used to be a rich, very beautiful culture in a lot of these European countries, America as well. But this is something that's been eroded, I feel anyway, by kind of the same fifth column forces that you're talking about. How do you view that, Maurice?
Well, you're making me think that in these third world countries that I've been in recently, by the way, Malaysia is actually quite advanced in many places. But anyway, I was in India, Malaysia, and Cambodia. And, the warmth of the smile and the people just meeting you for no reason. You're just going into a market to buy some fruit, or you're passing them on the road. I mean, I remember as a child witnessing that in England. A greeting, a sweetness, a warmth. I think it's all gone. It's all gone. You spend more time looking straight ahead and making sure you don't have eye contact with any strangers in the West, in London. That's what my life was like there.
How is that? Tell us about that. Why do you think that disappeared? Is that due to the fact that the homogeneity disappeared as well? That there is whether we like that or not, it seems to be the case that the more diversity you get, actually the more issues and cultural problems arise due to that, and you actually get more difficulty, and therefore hence people actually become more isolated and kind of a type of kind of hyper individualism arise in those type of societies. Is that what you think the reason is there?
Well, I was living in London, and at least half of London is now populated with people that were born elsewhere from another country. That is a huge transformation in maybe less than a generation. You're talking about 10 million people in one city just arriving. But the social effect is perhaps multiple, and some of it is surely due to mass media and capitalism just chasing the buck. But the role of mass migration and mixing everyone together is insoluble. I can't see how it can have a positive effect. You say freedom of travel sounds marvelous, and it does, and I love it, and may as many people as possible enjoy it. But I think you've got to start having the issues laid out clearly and not hidden. I mean, if you're a patriot now for America or England, you could be an extremist.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
The nation state is being dismantled before our eyes, and the mass migration is not really given much lip service, and if it is, it's referred to as extremist elements or with disdain. And there's somebody in England called the UKIP, UK Independence Party, and they're sort of anti-EU, anti-immigration. And there I saw the leader saying, well, yes, but of course we have to let Syrian refugees in. And that's the whole point of all the trouble in Syria, is to create these refugees and push them into. Next he'll be saying, well, of course we have to accept the West Africans that are escaping Ebola. We're all being manipulated all the way down the line here. If it's causing social upheaval on a minor level, it probably is, because everyone wants to be politically correct, Everyone's welcoming. Inclusiveness is the new religion. Everyone's welcoming everyone of every persuasion. Intuition, instinct has been kicked out. People rely on what they think are scientific, rational facts that they're told, and they're highly possibly lies, but they don't trust themselves. I guess the smiles and the warmth disappears once we lose trust in ourselves. And we've got to lose trust in ourselves when we're being bred on lies.
Yeah.
And most of the media is lies now.
Well, I mean, you're right. I think it's fairly easy to kind of see through that and actually see what is the main agenda, what is being pushed, how is it being pushed with, entertainment, and then of course news and everything else. And then you have the political kind of media climate, the press climate on top of that, which tells people, how to think about certain issues and what's acceptable and what's not. I mean, that's one thing we've been trying to do on this show recently, bring attention to this very aspect that many countries around the world are being transformed demographically in such an immense speed that it's not healthy. You know, it's something which is dangerous, and furthermore, it's something which at least at the the slightest little thing you should be able to do in that equation is at least to talk about it. But as we know, due to the media environment and climate now, people are, they're afraid actually of even addressing these issues and actually talking about it openly. I think that's actually one of the worst things that we can do. Wouldn't you agree?
Not discussing it is one of the worst things we can do. I agree, and it calls into question our journalists. They're all paid and they're given a brief, and the editors of the newspapers are given their briefs, and it's all, call it cultural Marxism, whatever. There's no divergence of views. Everyone's the same. I mean, in political leadership, all the parties are virtually identical. I think there's little chance. They've won, They're going to continue demographically altering the countries. They're still bombing Afghanis. They're killing them almost every day. They're terrorizing the country. There's loads of Afghanis in London now. That was the whole intention from the beginning. In the old days, we used to go to Africa and steal people and turn them into slaves. This is rather similar what's going on now, and we're all kept in the dark.
Yeah, and most people are not putting it together,
No one's putting it together. I'm not sure I addressed what you raised there, but
no, absolutely.
You can repeat the question.
No, it's all good. I'm talking about that in terms of the very basic issue of the fundamental issue of we must be able to address these issues, but the way that they've clamped down on this, that it's unacceptable to put into question the religious dogma of our time, which is, just as you said, not only political correctness but also inclusiveness and quote diversity unquote. But we know what this means at the end of it as well, which is of course an erosion of all the variances that we do have. It's actually an erosion of diversity. So it comes in this package of perhaps to some people sounding wonderful and whatnot, but then the very opposite is actually the end goal in that equation.
Yeah, I mean, I'd also like to blame alcohol. The youth culture, the alcohol culture is so strong. I think it numbs people, blinds people. The majority of people in London or Britain or even traveling, they've got to have a drink. And I question how serious they could get under the influence. And, maybe it's a way to ignore the obvious that we're all being overrun, and it's being implemented with the use of warfare.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, escapism comes in a lot of different forms and shapes, but drug use overall it's a huge problem, and I think that's one of the reasons why people allow it to happen. They just take the steam off, and on the weekends or whatever you call it, they open the steam valve and they're good to go for another week. I think a country like Sweden is actually a perfect example of that type of behavior. They look down in the street all week long, and then the weekend come, the binge drinks, until they collapse. So
yeah, right. Yeah, even on a daily level for many. But I'm not so pious. I'm older now. In my youth, I indulged plenty. Of course, I regret it now, but nevertheless, I'd like to fight for people not consuming it.
Yeah, I agree. I think people haven't understood what a huge, problem it is, and they can recognize and see that it might have been a huge problem for other, let's say cultures or people, and we do frequently hear about that repeated in that way. But when it comes to Westerners, it's kind of like, oh well, it's part of our culture. It's just what we do, so it's okay, But it works very similarly, I think, on a lot of different, people. But let me ask you about Middle East and the conflicts that goes on there, because that's an interesting issue in itself. We kind of a little bit addressed that in terms of what, why the wars are going on, what the fundamental reasons is. And there's many of them. It's just not the one reason. This is creating a cascading effect, which goes from, the war on the very people that the bombs are being dropped on until the very aspect that they have to flee from their own countries being uprooted. And then of course you have mass migrations into, Western countries and many other countries as well. But, Israel's role in the equation. Tell us about your view on this and what what their part of the scheme is here?
Well, I see Israel as the nexus, as the center of most world events and world affairs are even being done for Israel or on behalf of Israel, etc. I consider it totally multiracial, multicultural. They've had a lot of demonstrations against Africans and shown a lot of racism themselves against the black people. But even without that, they're a multicultural, multiracial society. And that is maybe a discussion on its own, because people come back at me and say it's not true. But I think they're a vanguard in the Middle East to destroy the Arab world and take control of it. And the Arab world has been quite homogenous, and they want it, a mirror image of a multicultural Western society without any Islamic laws. So I almost wonder how important the Jewish aspect is. We're all, of course, told that that's the reason for it all, but I could imagine them dissolving the Jewish religion or identity if their goals are achieved, to overtake the Middle East and destroy the Arab Islamic culture. That is what they're doing. They've got their fingers in pies everywhere, in every Arab country. It's almost jealousy and enviousness that drives them. But they've, meantime, raised a people so intolerably racist. And there's an irony, because I don't believe they are of one race, the Israelis, the Jewish Israelis, so-called. But they are totally racist against the Palestinians. There are multiple laws against it. And of course, the atrocities are never ending. We're lucky to see what headlines we do. A lot of them are censored. A lot of them never reach the news. There's widespread torture and murder, and it's just abysmal. And most of the pro-Palestinian voices and organizations in the West are entirely run by the Mossad or by Israel. And the ones that are not are called terrorist organizations, and we're not allowed to communicate with them. So I say that kind of with the tongue in cheek, because it's so embarrassingly true. But you'll find I'm becoming increasingly intrigued by just who all these activists are, myself included. You think, well, what is their personal motivation? What is their personal experience to draw them to this? And then you discover they've seen war crimes, or their conscience has been touched, or there's often a very personal reason why they become public spokespeople. You would be familiar. You might wonder yourself, because you interview so many.
Sure.
But in terms of Israel's role, it's out to destroy the Arab Islamic world by any means. I mean, it's just been on a killing spree for 60, 70 years. There was a recent revelation that there were concentration camps for a number of years in Israel, and I've seen the ethnic cleansing in 1948, old videos that don't seem to be available on YouTube anymore. Just one atrocity after another. But the world's public opinion is slowly turning. Maybe the internet's to play on this, but for a long time, everyone was pro-Israel, against all the propaganda we bought. And of course, you've now got to ask about all these terrorist acts of terrorism by these extremist Arabs, or were they just Israelis, And a lot of people will say the latter. And what else do you do when you've been in the military for 3 years, you've been committing war crimes, you've seen war crimes, you're totally built on racism, you've got the Holocaust in your blood, you're thinking about it all the time. What do you do after the military? What are you good for? You're not good for much, because you're divorced from truth and reality. In other words, you can be set off to go do a terrorist act anywhere for the sake of the Jews. We saw that recently with this guy that attacked Galloway in London. He had an Israeli military T-shirt on, and a lot of people don't buy Galloway as as that anti-Israeli. I know his rhetoric, and more power to him. He's not a bad guy, but just shows you the brainwashing and how emotional people get, and who knows what that guy's history is, the boy that beat Galloway up. But Yeah, Israelis will do anything. They've seen blood. They've been raised on the Holocaust, and we're all in the dark. I mean, Westerners, Americans, Europeans don't have a chance in comparison, and they seem to run our countries too. I understand all the French armament industries have got Jewish owners, and it's all pretty fraudulent. I have no real Jewish blood, but I didn't find out till I was older. And it, of course, made me reflect more than most have to. And it just might be a big fraud, you know, the whole thing might be about political social objectives for the whole world, including the multiracialism that we've discussed. And that might be closer to its real purpose and goals, and a stratification of a hierarchy where, of course, we have this elite running us all. But they're certainly gaining ground in destroying all our cultures. And they're modeling Israel on Jewish law from the Bible times.
Right.
But
so is that something that's going to spread? Do you think it's an implementation of a religious nature, that this is an ideology at the root of this, which is driving the implementation and the destruction that we've been talking about?
Well, yes, I think it's. I mean, they no doubt see the destruction as a means to an end. But yeah, I think in the West there's some famous book that says we're all Jews now, or similar, and you know we are following their religion. We're usury might be the number one point to pick that out, but they're totally in control of our thought process, our legislation. I think our social laws are gone
began after that point. It was actually like the kind of a breaking open, kind of the hard shell of Sweden to open it up to the rest of the world in a way,
Yeah, that's what they like to do to Russia now.
Oh yeah,
because the ruble's also under attack. And yeah, you just cook the books. It happened to Iran a couple of years ago. The currency devalued by 1/3 or more overnight. And it's all done with fraud and counterfeit. Pretty serious stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. We had a lot of enemies from within, and that were consequently blaming each other for for what occurred. But it was obvious that the rules for maintaining monetary balance was removed, at least in terms of the Swedish experiment there, and then eventually the whole economy collapsed. So you're absolutely right. That's another major issue to this as well. But well, it's been great talking with you, Maurice. I want to thank you so much for your time today. It's always fun to hear from you, and you share indeed some independent analysis and thought on a lot of the madness that we see today. And I want to, of course, let people know who might not be familiar with you where they can go and check out your videos online. So give us the website, Maurice.
Okay, it's youtube.com/108 Maurice, Morris, 108 again. So, or you just put in Google 108 Maurice 108.
All right, very good. We're going to have that link up as well for people. And yeah, thank you so much for your time today. I hope we can do it again in the future. Keep up the good work, and thank you again for coming on.
Oh, thanks you a million, Henrik. Thank you.
We have a lot more coming. We're getting some good shows lined up for you, some really important topics. Next up, we have John de Nugent on the Solutians, the first Americans. There's another Radio 314. After this, beginning next week, we have Kim and Dave, a personal story on the corruption and abuse of government and a law system that runs over people. Then we have James Swagger, Tracy Twyman, Laird Scranton, and Brian Hooker for more on the CDC whistleblower story. And of course, a lot more after that, so do stay tuned. RedIvesCreations.com is our website for the full program and the full archives. See RedIvesMembers.com. Go there and sign up for a subscription. Well, thank you for listening today, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back in just a few. Take care and stay well, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.